Today's video is going to be a little bit different in that there are no games in today's video. We're going to be talking about the announcement of the Legends of Runeterra World Championship. And I mentioned the games thing because some of you only show up for the gameplay, and that's fine. I appreciate you nonetheless, but today's video has no games, so I wanted to tell you up front. So the World Championship was announced. It's going to be coming later this year. The article says sometime around September, but there is no hard date given quite yet. They're probably still trying to plan some things on their own calendar, etc., etc. But they did detail the path to the World Championship, how you can qualify. And I've had a few folks message me because they were a bit confused, and I thought I would make a video walking folks through how you qualify for this amazing event, talk about the prize pool, and then at the end of the video I kind of want to I guess touch on some musings I've had about the future of the competitive side of Runeterra, if that makes sense. It'll make more sense when we get there, but first let's start with going through how you qualify for this event. So the finals themselves, the actual finals, the big grand finals, World Championships, is going to have 16 players competing, and those 16 players are going to compete for a prize pool, a total prize pool of $200,000. But leading up to that, there's going to be a number of ways for folks to qualify to become part of that top 16, and it's going to start with 64 players being chosen from Americas to compete in 6 out of those 16 spots. Similarly, you have 64 players from Europe that are going to compete for 5 of the finals spots. And then you're going to have 64 players from Asia that will be combined with 64 players from the Southeast Asia region for the other 5. So the top 16 is going to be 6 from Americas, 5 from Europe, and 5 from the Asian regions. Now, there's something to be said about American favoritism there, but I do think that has if I'm being honest here, a bit to do with just player pools and sizings. It's very easy to think about this as just being like the US, for example, but it's not. The Americas shard has a large number of very competitive players in it from more than just the United States. And so when you look at this breakdown, I think that it mostly has to do with player population sizes. But regardless of how they came up with those numbers, those are the numbers. This is the format set. And so that's where those 16 players are going to come from. Now, the next logical question then is, how do I become one of these 64 players for whatever region I'm in to compete for a spot in those sweet, sweet finals? That is this part. So they go on to say competitors can qualify in one of 3 ways. And then they detail what those 3 ways are. And so they're going to have 22 players chosen from ranked play, 20 from seasonal tournament finalists, and 22 from tournament points. And I'm going to break down what each of those mean, but you'll very quickly notice that that is 64 players total. And so these 3 are how you qualify for this part up front, which gets you to the finals. So this is all in text, but if you have to think of it as far as a flow chart goes, you're in one of these 3 lanes, which lands you here, which lets you compete to be here. And then this is like the end result of the finals. So with that in mind, what are the 3 ways you become part of your region's top 64? Well, again, 22 are coming from ranked. Well, what does that mean? Points will be awarded on your final rank at the end of each season. So think your ladder placement at the end of a season. Points are only awarded to Masters rank players. So if you're not Master, you get 0 points. If you're like me and you play till you hit Masters rank and then you just play a bunch of memes, you probably still get like 0 points. Like I probably get like 1 point per season, but technically I guess I get points. And then the top 22 players on each shard by the cutoff will earn a seat in the 64 to compete for the finals, etc., etc. Now their score, this is the interesting piece, their score is determined based on their best placement in 2 out of 5 seasons leading up to the World Championship. So what does that mean? Well, it means we're going to have 5 total seasons before the World Championship, and depending on how you have placed in those seasons, they're going to take your best 2. So if you finish number 1 on the ladder twice, and then for the next 3 you're like me, you're a meme caliber Masters player, They're still going to take your best 2, which is 2 number 1s, and you'll be set. You will likely qualify, because I don't know how you get better than 2 number 1s at that point. There may be some hidden tiebreakers there, but it's not detailed in this particular article. So that's, in my opinion, that's kind of nice, because it allows some folks to not feel bad if they have to take a season off, but it still also rewards the folks who put a lot of time and effort into grinding the ladder. Myself, for example, I work a full-time job, I make content, I have a wife and 2 children. I have a number of responsibilities that makes it so that I will never truly be able to grind the ladder. And that's part of the reason why once I do hit Masters, I usually just start playing memes, because that's how I can best spend my time. I do not fill myself with delusions of grandeur that I'm ever going to finish number 1, because I just don't have the time to dedicate to it. And that's fine for me, but for some people, they might have periods where they can dedicate a lot of time, and then periods where they can't, because they might have, seasonal work, for example. If you're a teacher, maybe in the summer seasonals, you can grind really hard and finish great in 2 seasonals, and then go back to kind of casual play the rest of the year and still potentially earn yourself a qualifying spot. So I know other adults like myself who have weird schedules like that, and I love that they are choosing to do 2 out of 5 seasons, so that if you front load and qualify early, you can maybe take the other ones off. Or if you're somebody who's busy and you can't go all in on a grind every time, you still have a shot at qualifying through ranked ladder play. Now, it's not just ranked ladder play, and that's part of the other thing that I really enjoy. So this is for the folks who just put in the time, right? Next up, you can qualify for being one of the seasonal tournament finalists. So essentially the top 4 players from each seasonal. So if you top 4 a seasonal, you're going to be part of the 64 fighting to get into that, top 16 for the world championship. And I love that as well. So they are rewarding ladder play, and they are rewarding tournament play, and top placement, right? If you do well in a tournament, then you deserve a seat at the table. They agree. So I love that they're doing this. Any duplicates will pass their seat to a qualifier based on seasonal tournament points. So if you're somebody who is top 4ing multiple seasonals, for example, then your seat is still going to be passed on, but it's going to be passed on via the 3rd way to qualify, which is seasonal tournament points. So the way that this works is like a combination of the 2. You get points that are granted based on your performance in each seasonal tournament. 1 point will be awarded per game 1 in both the open rounds and playoffs phase of seasonal tournaments. And so this kind of creates a secondary ladder, if you will, based solely on seasonal events. So this rewards consistency in tournament play. So we have consistency on ladder, we have top finishes in tournaments, and then we have consistency in tournaments. And so when you talk about the different paths to getting into an event, I really like that they chose these 3 as the method for becoming part of this top 64 for each of the regions. I absolutely adore this. I love this. So big fan of what they have debuted as the format. Now, we don't know if this will be the format forever, right? They could change it for next year. But so far, I like the thought that went into this particular set of qualifications. Now, this is beautiful, but you still got to put in the work. And then once you've done that, just qualifying isn't good enough. Then it comes back to that good old tournament play where you've got to be, one of the top finishers from your regions to go to Worlds. And then we get what I think is the best part, which is that big world championship where people from all over the globe are competing. And so we finally get to see, those European players face off against those American players and the Asian players. Because I know, for example, there are some folks in the Asian regions that grind the ladder like you would not believe, and they are great players. And so it's the old League of Legends thing, right? We all think about our nice LCS teams or whatever until Worlds comes, and then we're reminded that there are some amazing competitors out there. And so I'm really looking forward to the World Championship. I love the format. Again, Total prize pool for those top 16 finalists is going to be $200,000. It does also say that players will compete in a group stage featuring 4 player round robins. This should be familiar if you are one of the few folks who followed me for artifact content and you're still following me for Legends of Runeterra content. These group stage kind of like round robin-ish settings are what we play used for the artifact events, and so I'm looking really forward to this as well. That was it for the initial announcement. I did say that I wanted to talk about competitive musings because I've seen some conversations pop up, and I figured I might as well take this time to weigh in on it. The first is there are some folks that were disappointed that some of these were retroactively applied. The thought process being that for many folks, if there was a meta that they weren't enjoying, they would take their time away from grinding ladder to go do other things, because at the time there was no reason to really grind for ladder. I empathize with and I completely understand these players' frustrations, because it's very hard to say something mattered after the fact. So I get that. Now the good news is they've announced this, assuming this is the format going forward forever, or even, you know, now that we've seen this as a precedent, folks can plan accordingly. But I do understand the frustration there, and so I just wanted to say, you know, I agree with those players. They have my solidarity on that one. That one does feel a bit rough. I also understand, you know, from Riot side, where if this is your preferred format going forward, I don't think you want to implement one format for just 1 year and then go wildly different the next year. And I have to assume that they're trying to plan for the long term. So if they feel comfortable with this format and this is what we can expect going forward, then I would suspect that they just had to weigh the pros and cons of doing the retroactive thing. And it's a one-time hurt, it's a one-time pain. And again, I feel that pain for those players, but it's a one-time pain for setting up at least the skeleton, the foundation of something going forward. So you know, I get it, but I do understand why those players are frustrated. Now, other things that I've seen pop up that I find interesting are just talks about competitive experience in general. So for example, because you can now qualify for these big events from ranked ladder, there are some folks who want things like open deck lists for ladder, and they want full open deck lists for, you know, the seasonal events and things like that. This is interesting to me because I do understand it, right? Traditionally, you want your big tournament format to match all of your competitive formats, traditionally. But there has been precedent set by other card games where that's not always the case. For example, back when I played MTG, you could qualify, you know, through a limited event for a Pro Tour event that might be standard, for example. It's not always the case that your big tournaments match whatever you qualified for. But I understand the desire to have them mirror each other. There are also just, I think, benefits to open deck lists on things like the ladder, but there is also some potential downside. So one of the things I think gets lost is that the mobile experience does still matter for a game like this, big time, because the mobile experience is why this game is so accessible to so many people. And I'm not saying that you can't do open deck lists on mobile, but I'm saying that the experience has to be a good user experience. And you can't have open deck list features only available on PC, because that creates two different playing fields and a competitive disadvantage for playing on mobile. But you want mobile to matter because this is a card game. This is not a game where the power of your PC should be impacting your ability to play the game. You want to take, this is a global game, right? We're talking about world championships. You want to take into account that not every country is well off economically as some others. And so the ability to play on your phone, on a mobile device, is a really big deal for a lot of folks, and the accessibility matters. And I think that keeping that in mind and kind of prioritizing that we want the game to be available to as many people as possible is part of the balancing act of also making the competitive side of things, you know, a bit more competitive, a bit more fair, a bit more even. And so like, I understand the desire for the open deck lists, but I will say that the hurdle, and if I had to guess why it has not already been done on Riot side, is truly just the experience for all players. You have to do it in a way, in my opinion, that makes it a great experience for all involved. And I do not think that you can offer features on one device and not on another. And let's be honest, Riot does care about the mobile experience, because we've been seeing them make this big push into mobile lately, right? We've got Wild Rift, and a lot of the design choices for Wild Rift I actually think are improvements on League. The games play faster, but they're also trying to keep that in mind, right? You want the games to play faster, because if people are going to sit down and play hour-long games, then most of them are just going to end up choosing League anyway. And if they can't choose League, well, then that goes back to that accessibility thing, and you want those folks to also still have a good experience as well. And so like, I love what they've done with Wild Rift. Obviously Teamfight Tactics is on mobile as well. I love what they've done on that side. And so mobile matters, and I really do feel like the open deck list thing, that's the hurdle right now. I'm not saying that it's never coming. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody at Riot about it, but that's what jumps out at me, right? When I think about folks talking about open deck lists, I always think about like the user experience, and trying to do that on mobile can be difficult when you start talking about really strange deck lists. Now, with that being said, I have also seen some folks say that they would like to see the ranked ladder become just like the tournament experience, where you bring 3 decks, you ban one, and you play a best of 3 series, a match, if you will. And that is how you go up and down the ladder. And I understand that sentiment. As I said before, everybody wants to try to have the way that you play to qualify for an event match the way that the event itself works in terms of format. But the big issue here, as I was saying before, I think is, again, just mobile experience and player experience, because this means that you now have to dedicate a pretty significant amount of time to play a single ranked match. And given the direction in terms of design choices that they've made for some of their other games, I don't think that they want you to have to dedicate too much time for the ranked experience. Wild Rift, again, they've kind of shortened their games. Teamfight Tactics, I'm not saying you can't have long games there, but that's certainly something that they keep in mind. And there's a big difference between, you know, hey, I'm on my 15-minute break at work, I'm gonna play a ranked game, versus like, hey, I'm on my lunch hour, you know, I can dedicate some time to playing a ranked match. And that matters. And you might say, well, if you don't have the time, then just don't play ranked. But again, I think that they want to make the game accessible. And I think something that gets lost amongst those of us who play a lot of Runeterra, right? Whether you're a daily player or you're, you know, a top 5 ladder grinder, whatever. For those of us who live and breathe the game, it's very easy to forget that there's a large number of folks who play the game casually, and those players also will still play ranked, and that is also still important. It is important for Riot to have data on players of all different skill levels. It's important for Riot to have data on collection acquisition and where they sit on ranked ladders as well, so that they can do things like, you know, tuning the free-to-play experience in terms of rewards and this and that. And we want players to ultimately end up being matched up against players of somewhat equal skill, and so we should encourage the ranked format as the way to play. I know that there's ladder anxiety is a thing, and I empathize with that, and so I get why normals exist. Sometimes you just don't want to play a game with a, you know, a fear attached to losing and so forth. But the reality is, when it just comes to matching you with other players of your skill level, we should, as a community, be encouraging folks to just jump onto the ladder. And for me, that also means making ladder games very accessible and easy. And even more so when you think about the new player experience. If I'm coming from another game, or even if I've never played a card game before, teaching them that they not only have to play the game, but now they also need 3 decks can feel a bit overwhelming, right? Some folks just want to jump onto the ladder with a deck and start fine-tuning that one deck. And I think that's fine. And I think that that should be something that is available. And so I understand the desire to have ranked ladder match the tournaments, but we already have gauntlets, right? In my mind, I think that having a best of one ranked ladder is entirely fine because we already have this other existing system that is honestly, you know, better than most other card games currently on the market, where you can go and play in weekend tournaments and work on potentially qualifying for big events through said tournaments. I really enjoy the setup that Riot has because it does allow folks with different levels of time that they can spend. It gives them the opportunity to feel like that they can still participate and that they can still qualify. Even somebody like me, who's just you know, a bottom dwelling Masters player because of my time spent and my addiction to memes. You know, I'll be honest, the deck I posted yesterday for YouTube is a great example of the kinds of things that I like to play once I hit Master, because, you know, if I win 1 in 10, who cares? Like, I'm gonna have fun along the way. Today I was playing around with a Swain deck. Not Swain and, like, just straight Swain brings the pain, Noxus Freljord, super anti-aggro, probably loses really hard to Targon, though I did beat one Targon deck with it so far, but you know, because Leviathan still gets hit by Equinox and then you're gonna have a bad time, so like Targon's a bit rough. But outside of that, having a lot of fun with it, but it's not like a really competitive list, but those are the things I like to do. And yeah, because of the existing tournament structure, I still feel like I have a pathway to compete in seasonals if I wanted to. Now, again, I'd much rather be covering them. I like casting, and I like making the game more accessible to new players, which is also probably why I think this matters as much to me as it does, because I am not necessarily, like, I'm a fan of competition, but I am not necessarily what I would consider a competitive player in terms of Legends of Runeterra. That's not to say that I won't compete. I love playing in events. If I was ever invited to an event, I would do it. If I ever have the free time and there's open events, then, you know, I would absolutely participate. But I would much rather just be casting, because I like being informational and I like to bridge that knowledge gap for new players, and I like to showcase the things that I think make the game really fun and highlight all of those neat design interactions, etc., etc. And so for me, I think that the new player experience matters. And I really feel like if we make ranked go to a dedicated, you know, you have to have a best of 3 and you have to bring 3 decks, I think that that really hampers the new player experience. And right now, as far as I'm concerned, you know, if you're not somebody who's a fan of the League of Legends IP, I am, right? But if you're not, right, if you're trying to entice players to come over from, let's say, Magic the Gathering, and you're trying to get them to bail out of their sunk cost fallacy and everything that comes with being, you know, a 20-year veteran of playing MTG, if you're trying to attract those players, you have to have 2 things. You have to have a great new player experience, and you have to have a polished game. And so far, Riot has those things, but we have to be able to sell over and over and over again that Legends of Runeterra is very accessible and free to play and easy to pick up. I think that is the hallmark of the game, in my opinion. I think that's why it is as successful as it is, because you can't just rely on your IP. As somebody who covered Artifact, I'm just going to come out and say, as somebody who covered Artifact, you can't just rely on your IP to carry you, because if it's not new player friendly, if the game is hard to learn, and it feels overwhelming to get a collection, and it feels like you don't know where to start in terms of, you know, competition or ladder or whatever, people will lose interest very, very quickly. And Riot has not had a problem in any of those areas, and that's why I trust their judgment, and I think that they will continue with the ranked ladder existing as is, because it is very approachable for new players. It's very approachable for returning players. If you're somebody who, like me, for example, I took some time off because I was covering Valorant last year. And then when I came back to the game and I was like, you know what? I really miss Runeterra. I miss card games. I want to start covering them again. I want to do content. It was great because of the wild card system and the extremely generous free-to-play system. And I could pick up right where I left off. And it did not feel like a daunting process for me. And I think that we need to keep that. And I don't know. I just feel like if you were to poll a bunch of people who did not play this game and you told them that there were two options, and one of them was, you know, a best of one, you bring one deck, and then the other one was the best of three, you have to own 3 decks, and so on and so forth for climbing the ladder. I think that players who don't play this game would be more inclined to choose the first one. And I think that's important because we're always trying to win over new players. The more people playing this game that we love, the more support it will get for years to come. And so we should all be champions for, you know, ease of access, make it approachable, etc., etc. But anyway, that's just me and my own, you know, personal take. Again, I empathize with the competitive players. If you're somebody who loves Legends of Runeterra competition, I get it. You want more of that because that is what fires off those endorphins for you. And so giving you the ability to have that tournament style experience day in and day out, I understand it. I get why you would want it. But sometimes we have to make sacrifices, I think, for the greater good. And I think this is one of them. I think leaving ranked as a best of one is just going to overall be better for the game. And then keeping these gauntlet style tournaments on the weekends, the best of 3, to let folks be able to experience that, but also give them time to prep for it, etc., etc. I think that's the happy medium. I think that is the best of both worlds. So anyway, if you made it this far, I appreciate you. This was a lot of just me talking, and I don't like the sound of my own voice. So if you did in fact make it this far, you are a saint. You are an angel, and you are somebody who should probably subscribe to the channel if you have not already, because you made it through this. So you clearly want more. I don't know what else to tell you, but I love you all. Thank you for watching. Until next time, may you walk on warm sands.